Alright, so today is a bit of a sad day. I'm gonna see my Sony A7r5 go to a new home. So I've been using this camera for about a year, and this is the story of my Sony A7r5. Alright, so I picked up this camera in 2023, end of 2023. It was out for maybe a year already. And at that time, I guess I wanted a super high resolution photo camera because I actually never had a super high resolution photo camera before. So this was my first foray into having something that's actually more than 50 megapixels. So I picked this camera because it was a Sony. I was already a Sony user. I used the A7S3 before, FX30, A7 III. So I had a pretty substantial collection of lenses, so it was a pretty obvious choice for me to get this camera. So at that point in time when I got this camera, this was the first camera to have Sony's AI AF chip inside. So I think that that was one of the main reasons why this camera was so good and why I loved it so much. So let me share with you the reasons why I actually love this camera so much, and maybe talk about some things that I wish that this camera had that it doesn't. So when this camera was actually out, a lot of people failed to realize they actually addressed most of the complaints about Sony cameras from the past. So all the things I like about this camera actually are things that were addressed by Sony in changing and upgrading their camera menu structure, ergonomics and things like that. So I think this was quite a pretty good substantial update to the alpha line of cameras. So what I really liked about this camera, the headline feature is the AI chip for AF. So I brought this to Africa recently. It actually tracks all sorts of animals. It doesn't fail to recognize any animal you throw at it. So I think they programmed most of the animals into this system. It picks up land animals, air animals, sea animals. So I think I got it to track a crocodile. I got it to IAF on a crocodile. I got it to AF on an eagle that was actually eating its prey. So it wasn't actually flying. It was just standing there, bent over, and yet it still could recognize the eagle and get IAF on it. All your standard four-legged animals, I think no issue with that. Dogs and cats, yeah, definitely that's for sure. So I feel that the programming of the AF here really is quite good. You can actually focus on many different types of subjects that you may have not seen yet or may have not photographed in real life yet. But when you point it at something, I think you might be surprised at what it can pick up. So this thing actually picks up fish. So you can IAF on fish. So you can give that a go at your aquarium. Okay, so what I also liked about the update was the updated ergonomics of the camera. So this thing is not the super new body in the A9 III or the A1 II, but it does have a slightly longer grip, a slightly bigger grip than the previous generations. And also it has the A7 IV style of movie, S&Q and photo. So there's this convenient switch that's just at your index finger. So I really like this because you can quickly switch between video, S&Q and actually taking photos, especially when you're doing content. It's so convenient. You can be taking photos, then get your footage, then just go back to taking photos with a flick of a switch. So I think ergonomics wise, they really improved from the previous generation. They also started to put in this wheel that it's so loved by people now. So this wheel is the one that used to be exposure compensation, but now it's a freely turning wheel. There's no limitations to it and it has a lock. So there's no markings also, so you can reprogram this to do other things like ISO. And I find that, yeah, this is great. It gives us flexibility to do more things. And we're not just limited to the original exposure compensation feature of this dial. Otherwise, the buttons and the button layout are pretty Sony. I don't think there's any much difference to them. If you have used the Sony before, you have no issue and you'll be right at home with it. Still has the joystick, D-pad that turns, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's Sony. The next thing that everybody was talking about, another headliner feature, was the flippy tilty screen. So this super mini axis, mini angle screen is the same screen that you'll find in your A9 III and your A1 II. So you can listen to other people rave about it, but all I can tell you that it's the best in the industry for Sony, and I think that they need to keep this screen. So one thing that is hardly said about the screen is that actually it has a pretty good color gamut of the screen. I think it's a DCI P3, correct me if I'm wrong, color gamut, and it actually is quite color accurate and it shows up the colors quite well. So I think you can use this to sort of proof your images if you want to out in the field. I think color accuracy of the monitor is slightly better than the EVF. So now we get to the EVF. EVF is still the best EVF around. It's like 9.4 million dots. So this is super high res, bright enough, super big. That's what I like. And it's, yeah, great for reviewing your photos. So people think that a high-res screen is a bit useless for the EVF because you're just taking photos. But the value in this comes when you're in a bright environment and you want to review your photos. This is extremely good because it shows you your photos at full resolution and it's super sharp. So you can tell if your photo is in focus or out of focus. So that is what I love about this. To power everything, this has the latest processors, I think. So it's super fast. It has the new menu system. Navigating the menu, it's seamless and you don't really need to struggle with it like the previous Sonys, where when you were taking photos and it was buffery, you couldn't do a lot of things. But this one, at least it's a little bit better, and it's very, very responsive in the menu. So when you press everything, it just feels very snappy. The speed of shutter release and everything actually is very snappy, so I like that a lot. It comes with the MI shoe, which is found in all the modern Sonys. I don't think this is the first camera with the MI shoe, but I think the MI shoe is great. I have the microphone for it, I have the XLR adapter for it, and I think it's so convenient when you are out and about trying to get some good audio. So yep, MI shoe is the best. Down to the main things of why this camera still is so good. The IBIS is 8 stops or 8.5 stops. I think it's almost the same as the new A1 II, and I think it's really, really impressive. So this has redefined how I actually take photographs. Because your classic landscape photos, you always think that, oh, I need a tripod. But actually for this, even with this 24mm lens, I managed to get like 1 or 2 second exposures, super sharp. Yeah, so I don't think you actually absolutely need a tripod when you're doing landscape photography, except when you want the intentional long exposure with your ND filters, or if you're trying to do some trails and things like that where you're exceeding like 30 seconds. So if you're just trying to get your shot, I think these days you can do without a tripod and save some weight. Just bring a small tiny tripod and use it when you really absolutely need it. So yeah, this thing has changed how I look at photography now because of the tech in this. And the last thing that I really loved is the image quality. So this sensor, 61 megapixel, is used in the Leica. So if you're a Leica fanboy, you can't say bad things about this camera. I think this camera still has one of the highest dynamic ranges of a photo camera, which is 35mm full frame. So I think, yeah, I can just take photos without my ND filters, without graduated ND filters. And more than likely, you can sort of recover them. You can apply virtual graduated filters in post, and it has also changed how I view photography. So photography doesn't need to be going out to the landscape with a pack of filters, a big tripod. You can just go out with this and just have fun. And you can just get your landscape shots and be done with it. Okay, so that's what I loved about this camera. And it's been rugged, sealed, brought it everywhere the past years, never failed me. It's been super stable, so I would expect this out of a professional sort of camera. And it served its purpose well. Okay, so now to what I wished it had and what I don't really like about this camera. So I guess the most subjective complaint about Sony bodies is that the grip is too small. But I find that it's alright because I have this cage on it, so that makes up for slightly larger grip. I think it's quite comfortable. I don't have any complaints about it. The weight matters also, so that even though grip is small, the camera is light, so it doesn't really matter that you need to have such a big grip on it. And the lenses are also quite small, so it's quite easy to handle. What I actually wished it has is better rolling shutter performance. Okay, so the main complaint many people have about this is the rolling shutter. So on electronic shutter, you can't really use this as a action camera or any other kind of camera other than a static still life or landscape camera. So the rolling shutter is quite bad. If you try to take photos of birds, you might capture the wingtip as an artifact in some other part of the scene. If you try and do some panning, everything is going to be like at a 45-degree angle. If you try to track birds in flight, everything is going to be slanted. So yeah, just don't do it. Speeds do not increase by using electronic shutter also. So I think you should just not use electronic shutter if you have this camera. Continuous burst speed, it's about 10 FPS. It is sufficient. It's not the best. But sad to say, after trying it out in the field for wildlife, I think it's not really enough. Keeper rate, of course, would be higher if you had more FPS. So that is one of the drawbacks of this camera. I wish that they could have made the mechanical shutter go up to maybe 14 FPS, like last time Canon did with their 1DX. And I think some of the cameras also can do up to 14 FPS, just not a Sony. Yeah, so bummer there. And also for video mode, 8K is a bit of a gimmick because of the rolling shutter. It's so bad. If you try to do a handheld shot, it will probably be jello and everything is super slow. So I don't really think that the 8K is suitable for anything other than a static locked off tripod shot. Yeah, video quality is acceptable. Only thing, it doesn't have those 120 modes, which is also a bit of a disappointment. I would have expected a camera costing $5,000 to have some sort of higher speed, but it just tops off at 50 or 60 FPS in 4K. And cropping down, you still get 4K, which is pretty decent, but you still don't get high FPS. So that's a bit sad. Okay, so I think that the camera has everything. It has addressed all the issues that people have been complaining about, especially with the new menu system. This comes in line with all the other modern cameras already. So if you are thinking of picking up an A7R5, I think it's still a good time to pick up an A7R5. It has improved on all the features of the past Sony cameras and is in line with the most modern ones like the A1 II and your A9 III. So the menu system is similar, handling is similar, just that the body shape is not exactly similar, but it's still not that bad. It just needs maybe 15 FPS and it'll be a perfect all-rounder camera with a high-res sensor. Yeah, so interestingly enough, no one talks about this, but the only difference between this and the A1 II is 20 extra FPS. So I think to me that is the only major difference between this camera and the A1 II. So just judge for yourself whether the A1 II is worth almost double for extra 20 FPS. So sad to see this go. And if you're wondering what I will use next, I'm too jaded with photography already, so the camera is too good. And I'm just going back to basics and using my Nikon F3. So this has been a reliable workhorse, and I'll continue to use this and let's see where this takes me.